A story from our partners at the Center for Investigative Reporting's podcast Reveal about Jane and John Doe's, America's nameless dead. Last month, a baby girl found on the shore near Boston was finally identified as Bella Bond. But there are still thousands of unknown bodies waiting for their own identification in city morgues and public cemeteries across the nation. Reveal's Michael Schiller has the story.
Alice Almendarez and her four sisters knew something was wrong when a week went by without hearing from their father.
My dad was a softie. He had 5 girls, and he adored us.
When Alice tried to report him missing, she says the Houston police didn't take her concerns seriously. She says that because he had a criminal record and no permanent address, the police assumed he had intentionally left his family.
They told me that maybe my father didn't want to be found. Maybe he was tired of having a family. It was hard because you felt like you were fighting them to do their job.
She didn't learn his fate for 12 years.
You can't celebrate a holiday when there's somebody missing from the room. I actually was supposed to get married, and I didn't get married because I couldn't get married without my dad.
The FBI estimates that there are some 80,000 reported missing people on any given day in the United States. At the same time, there are over 10,000 unidentified bodies. There is no national law requiring agencies to share this information, leaving many families in the dark about their loved one's fate. The U.S. Justice Department calls it the nation's silent mass disaster.
Sooner or later, we have to address this problem.
After 13 years as Las Vegas coroner, Michael Murphy says that because there is no unified approach to reporting Jane and John Doe's, bodies go unidentified far too long.
You could have a body that was on one side of a county line, and the next county could have had that individual reported as missing, and no one may have talked to each other.
In Alice's case, it happened within the same Texas county.
YouTube or on my website about what beyond a reasonable doubt means. And in the state of Maine, we say that it means that the charges are almost certainly true, but I don't know that that quite goes far enough to explaining to a jury what that means. And I want to explain to you in my mind what that means. And one of the ways I do that is I have this chart that I use sometimes in trials. It's called a levels of proof chart. And one of the reasons for this is to compare this for a jury, compare reasonable doubt and beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury with other levels of proof and other types of cases that they might have heard about. For example, if you have no evidence in a case, no trace of evidence whatsoever, you have obviously a not guilty verdict. If you have a scintilla of evidence, if the jury believes that there might be a small amount of evidence that the defendant is guilty, then they must render a not guilty verdict. If the jury has reasonable suspicion that the defendant is guilty, meaning that not that the suspicion is based on a hunch, but that it's based on a particular set of facts, then they must render still a not guilty verdict. If the jury has probable cause to believe that the defendant is guilty, probable cause meaning reasonable and trustworthy information that a particular person has committed the crime charged, they must render a not guilty verdict. If the jury believes by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant is guilty, then they must render a not guilty verdict. The preponderance of the evidence is the scales of justice you see a lot. So if they believe the scales tip towards the government, then they must render a not guilty verdict. If the jury believes by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant is guilty, meaning that the jury has a firm belief that the allegations against the defendant are true, they still have to render a not guilty verdict. And if there is reasonable doubt, again, they must render a not guilty verdict. It is only getting beyond a reasonable doubt to the top of, in this case, a staircase, that they can render a guilty verdict. And that's very important for a jury to understand. So one of the jobs of the defense lawyer is to try to explain to a jury just how important their job is, and that part of their job is to properly apply the reasonable doubt standard. If you have any questions for me about this, or would like to discuss this or any other matter with myself or the lawyers who work for me at Zerillo Law LLC, please feel free to contact us by phone, 207-347-6063, or look us up on the internet. Our website is pretty informative and tells a lot about myself, about our practice, about the other lawyers who work here who are very fine lawyers, and that is www.getzerillo.com, www.getzerillo.com. Thanks for watching.